Hey USA, it's just me, and as you know, I'm nobody, just an American, and this is Just an American Moment. This is the podcast where we ask the questions the mainstream media refuses to ask, and we provide the answers and solutions that the political class either can't or won't. So, welcome to today's podcast. We're running a day late this time because we added a new puppy to our family, and it's been a bit time consuming. But anyhow, I want to jump into it. Now, I was going to start on the lighter side today, but after spending the weekend screaming at my TV and the Sunday morning talking heads and watching their inability to ask common sense questions and seeing the total incompetence of those people who are meant to be our elected representatives and the administration's representatives, I decided to preface this podcast with a few comments and questions. So the first of these is this whole thing of Facebook banning former President Trump. Their explanation was the events of January 6th, which again, most Americans have no clue what January 6th represents or quite honestly doesn't represent. But I have one question for Facebook. What kind of independent investigation did you carry out? The Congress hasn't even investigated January 6th yet. So, based on hearsay, based on what you assumed from what you may or may not have seen on TV, or you heard the representation by specific networks on TV, or you heard specific references from Democrat representatives, you decided to basically violate our First Amendment. Now, I know you're a private company, but give me a break. I mean, I got to tell you, I used to be a CEO in Silicon Valley. I was a CEO of both publicly traded and privately held companies. And I want to know where all these people, these executives, suddenly get off banning or canceling people. You know, during my entire career, it spanned 40 years in international big tech, I can't recall of any CEO behaving quite at this level. Now, we had our extravagant people who did some kind of interesting things, but not being so politically correct, and it's not correct, that they would ban a person, just a person, let alone the former president of the United States, from having an opinion. You know, these people do a total injustice to their shareholders, to their employees, to their customers. They don't know what the political or philosophical persuasion is of those people. Yet they've decided what we, the public, are allowed to hear and not allowed to hear. Now, I don't care what your political persuasion. America, this is a very, very bad thing. This is so un-American, I can't even imagine. You know, it may be a cliche, but I thought part of being America was that I may disagree with the things you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say them. That's what the America I came from is or was. So, what's with this new trend? Folks, you get that in totalitarian countries, not the United States of America. And this led me to wonder about some other things. I guess just a tangent in terms of what I was hearing and things that were angering me. But does anybody wonder where the Durham report is? The investigation? What happened? And, has it ended? Is it still ongoing? Is it in limbo? How many taxpayer dollars have been spent on it thus far? Has it been squelched by the Biden people? Um, don't we at least have a right to know? Maybe you don't want to give the American public answers because maybe there's things that were disclosed that they don't want the public to know. But why isn't the media at least asking the question? Why aren't Republicans asking the question? I'd say why aren't Democrats asking the question? But we kind of know that they don't want anything disclosed from that report. And this takes me back to like the whole Steele dossier and the Russian collusion thing. $40 million was spent on investigating Russian collusion. Does anyone know how that money was allocated? How that was spent? That was our money. That was the taxpayer dollar. How was that money spent? We don't know. I know that Mueller got to make a trip to the Seychelles. Now, what the hell he was doing in the Seychelles? It's a great vacation spot, but I'm not sure what he was doing there as far as this investigation is concerned on Russian collusion. And there's that whole question about the false FISA applications. Have they stopped being investigated? Is anyone going to be penalized for this? Why is there a double standard? Why is there a double standard? And shouldn't we as Americans care about this? I would think we should. But anyhow, that's enough venting for today. Because I might drive myself crazy if I go beyond that. Let's have some fun instead. Although this does touch back on the old double standard. Remember when I told you a few weeks ago that someone wanted me to talk about Laurie Laughlin and her husband Massimo Giannulli and the whole campus admissions deal, getting their kids into USC, I believe it was. Well, guess what? This week we're going to talk about it. But perhaps we're going to do it a little bit differently than you might have expected. Maybe because some of you are asking the same questions that I've been asking, but our friends in the mainstream media just refuse to ask. They never do. It's so funny. And why haven't they asked? Well, maybe because some of them actually find themselves in the same situation as Laughlin and Giannulli, but in their case, they got away with it. And as you'll see, I'm not kidding about this. Think about it. Now, do I approve of what they did to get their kids into a good college? Nah, it was inappropriate. But then I think anyone who does it that way is inappropriate. What I do understand is that all parents want to get their kids into a good school, and that's noble. Who doesn't want their kid to attend a good school? The funny thing is, the media and others think Laughlin and Giannulli, and Hoffman for that matter, were some kind of anomaly. On the contrary, they were just stupid. Think about it. Yeah. There's several things about this entire story that absolutely make me crazy. First of all, it's insulting that they, as part of the so-called elite, and I guess that's what celebrities think they are, thought they could leverage their wealth and prestige. The fact is, their methods were ignorant, and I'll explain why in a moment. It's also curious that the media, for the most part, only focused on them and none of the others involved in this scam except Felicity Hoffman. Because the media thinks that the rest of the country is celebrity obsessed, so are they. And let's remember, Giannulli and Laughlin got scammed. The fact is, the media and the government did an incomplete investigation. Lastly, perhaps the most insulting aspect of the entire story is the Orwellian aspect of our tiered social system and justice system, which has been totally ignored by the media. And I'll make my point on this. First, what they did was stupid. They fundamentally gave someone a lot of money to try and bribe their kids' way into college. Obviously, they were unfamiliar with how things are done in this country. Uh, Given Laughlin and Giannulli coughed up $500K, $500,000, they they demonstrated how unschooled they are in these kind of practices, and they obviously don't know how to use leverage. All they needed to do was make a $500,000 contribution to the school of their choice, and I assure you, their kids would have been accepted. And if you don't believe that, you're either very naive or something far worse. Because if you don't think universities look at who donates what to their, whether it's their alumni fund, their building fund, or just to a simple grant to the university, and then reward those people for it, you are clearly mistaken. Now, what happened with Laughlin and Giannulli? They didn't know to play that game. So they didn't get they got caught and they got punished, which is amazing. But you know, what got me thinking, and what's even worse as far as I'm concerned, far more heinous, is the political class in this country. Now, ask yourself, how do politicians manage to get their kids into all these Ivy League schools? Are they brilliant? And how on a politician's salary do they afford these Ivy League schools? You know, I often wonder, how did Joe Biden's two sons go to Ivy League schools? Where are their transcripts? I'd like to see them. You know, was there maybe a little leverage? Don't you wonder how not only did Joe pay for two Ivy League undergraduate schools, he paid for law school and he paid for prep schools prior to college. Now, how do you do that on a poor working man's salary? You know, Joe always tells us he's from a blue collar family. Well, where'd the money all come from? He certainly didn't inherit it. You know, so don't you wonder sometimes how these people get in, these politicians' children and relatives and grandchildren? Well, ask yourself. Many of these people serve on various appropriations committees that allocate funding to federally funded universities. Now, you don't think that they use leverage and the university system give in to that leverage? When these people make a phone call and say, oh, my grandson, my daughter, they'd like to attend your university. And oh, by the way, we have a funding committee meeting coming up where we're going to evaluate grants. And I would sure like to see my grandchild or my daughter come to your university. You don't think that happens? Of course it happens. We've seen it so obvious. We've seen it with the President of the United States. Not only in colleges. Don't you ever ask yourself, how did a 43-year-old Hunter Biden get into the military? Any of you out there who are in your 40s, you think you could get into the military now? Unless maybe you're a doctor. I don't think so. So this entire university acceptance process is a joke in this country. It's just another insider's club. The solution is not all that challenging. Federally funded universities need to be far more transparent in who they accept. There is clearly an unequal system for doing that. And we ought to look at it. But, it's that old philosophy, folks, that we keep talking about. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal. Just ask Nancy Pelosi. In the case of Laughlin and her husband, they failed to play the game by the special rules. They were put in the penalty box. Meanwhile, others continue to play the game and to benefit. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Remember my book, I'm Nobody, Just an American. Really could use your support in getting this book. I think it asks a lot of questions and offers a lot of answers and solutions that you want. So thanks very much again for watching. Take care.